All right. Hey, good morning. It's Thursday, and when the week's flying by, it seems like they do these days, and so it is what it is. Yesterday, man, we had a good day yesterday, and did a funeral, little graveside yesterday for an older friend of mine that used to go to church with us. He had dementia for the past 2 or 3 years of his life, and so it was good for that. Bittersweet in so many ways, but just a good, quaint, enjoyable ceremony of a life well lived, and so it was good. I'm one of those guys that enjoys the funeral, not because I'm morbid in any way, but I follow the logic of Solomon, who said it's better to go to a house of mourning than a house of feasting, for death is the lot of every person, and the wise take it to heart. And there's something different that happens to us when we're standing at a graveside or when we're standing before someone who has passed. It makes us think deeper. It should. And to be more reflective of our own life, because that is the end of where we all go. So two things: did I live this life well, and am I prepared and ready for the next life, the one to come? And so those were the things that were taking place. It was just good seeing some old friends and just catching up on what's going on in life. And so it was a good day yesterday. And so last night, Tammy and I just watched one of the little Hallmark movie things and just kind of just chilled for a minute. Life gets busy for us. And so sometimes we just grab an evening and sit on the sofa together and just watch a movie. And so we had a great night. Up today and ready to rock and roll. So we're in Luke chapter 13, and making our way through this and enjoying what is taking place. Let me put you in some perspective of kind of where we are. Jesus, the crowds are swelling. He just had healed a woman who for 18 years had. I was trying to find my text. Who for 18 years had been bent over because of a demonic influence, and her health was terrible. And Jesus heals her on the Sabbath, freaks out the Pharisees, who are like, you got 6 days in a week to do this. Why did you do it today? And Jesus began to really just say, well, listen, if you've got an ox and your animals, don't you untie them so they can eat, and you're fussing at me? And the whole crowd kind of went crazy at that point. Because of the humiliation that the Pharisee who attempted to kind of chastise Jesus found himself in. And so that's where we are. And so I think Jesus, if I put this in context, because it almost feels like a shift in gear in some sense in thought, the next thing that we're looking at. But to put it in context, these crowds are amassing because they believe that the kingdom is coming. Right? They think maybe this is the Messiah. And so now the Pharisees have already decided, no, he's not the Messiah. He's a tool of Satan. We want nothing to do with him. We're going to try and kill him. I don't know if they actually believed that, or they were so intimidated by him that they just wanted him gone. At any rate, they were on the outside. But then there were those like James and John. Remember, their mother came to Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, I want my sons to sit one on your right and one on your left. So she had in mind this kingdom, right? And so all of Israel thought that way. You go through all of the Old Testament, and you will see where they knew that there was going to be a true kingdom. Like David, even though he was king over Israel, knew there was one coming after him who would rule the world, and the kingdom would expand. And so they had that mindset. You can read it all through the scriptures. You can look at Isaiah, where you begin to see it unfold. The government will rest on his shoulders, and all of these prophetic deals speaking of the kingdom. Micah goes into great detail, the prophet Micah, and explains in great detail this kingdom and the looking forward to it. You can find it in chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 5. The Psalms speak of it. And so they understood that. So listen, Israel at this point is not much bigger than it is today. It's just a sliver on the side of the Mediterranean Sea. And so from the scheme of things, the thought that that kingdom would come and it would overthrow Rome, in some sense was somewhat laughable to the outside world. And that's why Pilate at the end goes, "Are you a king?" Looking at Jesus as he's going to sentence him, he's like, "Well, if that was the big kingdom of Israel, it's not that big, is it?" Right? And so these thoughts were going on, and I think Jesus, knowing that he is moving to sacrifice himself for all of us and to truly usher in the kingdom. He already said the kingdom is among us. The kingdom is within us. But there is going to come a kingdom, and so this is in his mindset. I think he sees this woman who had been doubled over for 18 years, a new citizen of the kingdom. Right? I mean, you can see that unfold. And so I say all this because he's going to tell us what the kingdom is like. And I want us to kind of have our mindset in there. The thief on the cross, what does he say? Remember me when you do what? Come into your kingdom. So here is this thief on a cross who had been ridiculing him along with the one on the other side, saw a shift in Jesus, and then begins to look at him, knowing that he's going to die, understood that this kingdom, maybe because Jesus was having conversation with him on the cross, maybe the people in the crowd were schooling this thief, but this thief began to understand that the kingdom wasn't something that was going to come now, but was going to be like a paradise or something. And so in his mindset, he's looking and saying, hey, when you remember me, when you come into your kingdom, they're both going to die. And so he understood the thief probably more than all of the others who were expecting. All the apostles are kind of in somewhat depression, thinking, "Man, we thought the kingdom was coming, but I guess it's not. I guess we missed it, right?" And so there was some confusion about all of that, and the fact that the kingdom was somewhat small, if there was one, right? There were 12 apostles. One who was going to betray. There were the 70 that were the evangelists, so to speak, that were divided and went around 2 by 2. There were somewhere around 5 to 6 women that was a part of Jesus and his ministry. And so you kind of see this kingdom in that sense. And so it was a little fuzzy for a lot of people. But I think that this shifts because Jesus knew that the kingdom was on the mind of those people. And so they're swelling and they think, oh, well, maybe he's going to put down the Pharisees first. And maybe that's what's going on. And so they're all jubilant. You remember that was how it was spoken of. The entire crowd was rejoicing over all the glorious things being done by him. So they think he must be the king. And because Jesus knew that the kingdom was not going to happen in the expanse that we believe it to be as we see it laid out in the scriptures, he makes this statement. So he was saying, in the midst of that, what is the kingdom of God like? So what is this kingdom of God like? Does it look like this, where healings are taking place and all of these things are going on, or exactly what does it look like? And so he tells us, and it's very simple. This will probably be a short lesson today. He gives us 2 examples. Let's read them, and then we'll come back and talk about them. So he was saying, what is the kingdom of God like, and to what shall I compare it? It is like a mustard seed, which a man took and threw into his own garden, and it grew and became a tree, and the birds of the sky nested in his branches. And again he said, to what shall I compare the kingdom of God? It's like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 seah of flour until it was all leavened. Right? He said, this is what it's like. Now, these were things familiar to everyone in the crowd because it was an agrarian society for the most part. You had shepherds and you had livestock, and then you had farmers, and they were gardens, and then you had women who were making bread. That was a staple in their day. Bread was a constant staple. They ate a lot of bread along with whatever meat and other things that they would eat. And so these were 2 things that they were familiar with. And so he's taking something familiar. The size of a mustard seed was a big deal. It was all through the scriptures. You can find that. Even today in the Middle East, that they speak of that. It's prevalent in their area. It's a small seed, and I don't want to make much of that. He's just simply saying something really tiny. He said it's like something really tiny, being thrown into some fertile ground. And after a season, the tree sprouts and the tree grows, and they're somewhere around 8 feet, I think, some tall, and they kind of spread out like a Bradford pear in some sense. We've got one in our neighbor's yard over here, and kind of hides the mountain view from us, but the trunk goes up and then it just spreads out, right? And so what the result of that was, that little seed gave kind of a haven, so to speak, to all the birds of the air, right? And so we see it kind of as a refuge for many. And I think that's a fair assessment of what the kingdom of God is going to be. It's going to start small. And this is what I think we need to see, because in their day, they're like, well, where is this kingdom? But it's small, and it will take a minute for it to get to its external state. This isn't going to be some rapid fire kingdom and all of a sudden there's the castle and there's the army and there's the king. It will happen when the Lord comes back. But I think they were thinking it was going to happen just like that. So he's thinking, I know you're looking around going, okay, well, there's a crowd and they seem to be all joyous. But really, where's his kingdom? How's it going to start? And so it starts like that. The kingdom of God starts externally in that sense with the King of Kings, who before he became the king dies. That's why Jesus makes this statement, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, right? It has to do that so that as it begins to separate and then from it roots begin to grow and sprout, then life begins to happen, right? And it produces fruit. This was Jesus. Jesus has to die so that then this fruit can begin to grow, and it can begin to permeate, and it can begin to grow into a haven for people. And I think we've seen that. You and me on this side, 2,000 years later, don't we see the kingdom? I mean, I see it. You see it everywhere. You see, and again, don't confuse what I'm going to tell you with the kingdom. I'm not saying America is that, but when you think this would be another parable, I guess. When you think that a group of people came over to this land with biblical principles and began to say, we want to govern with these biblical principles. To literally, some of those people wanted to bring the kingdom to earth, so they set up kingdom principles, and they were doing that. And as our country grew, not so much today, we're not that minded, but there was a time when America was known as the breadbasket of the world, right? We grew. That small beginnings of America grew to this resource that gave shade and comfort and home for so many. That's the Statue of Liberty, and everybody coming into this and looking for they were the poor and the tired, right? And they come to this place. We became a tool that God used to truly evangelize the world. More missionaries have come out of America in the 200 and some odd years that it's been than any other place in the world. And so you see that, right? It's this, and you see what started small is now a huge nation. Influence is waning these days, but back in my younger days, it was expanding, and people saw this as the last bastion, the last hope of the world, so to speak. Well, so take that, translate it into the kingdom, and that's what it is. You look at the church today, and you see that it is the church that is it is the Christian. You don't find the other religions in small pockets, but you don't find the others taking care of the world when famine comes and when disaster strikes. But you see Christians there. You see Christians almost everywhere. And Samaritan's Purse and the Graham organization, Franklin's organization, man, they're everywhere. They've got a mobile hospital. You see it pull into port wherever it is. You see you don't even know the breadth of that, but that's like the kingdom of God that is growing, and the influence of Christianity is strong, right? Now, it's not taking over the world, but Jesus is saying this is what the kingdom is going to look like. He gives us another one when he speaks of this term of leaven. And he says, Uh, and again, what can it compare to? It's to leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 seah of flour until it was all leavened. And so, one is there's this external thing that you see, right? Which is we see the church today, as tarnished and tattered as it is. We see the influence of the church today, right? Which is in some sense a precursor of the kingdom. That church becomes the bride of the kingdom that God will extend, and so we see that. Then he says there's kind of this internal thing that's taking place, that thing that's under the surface, almost. So leaven is almost like the seed before it grows. It's permeating, it's bubbling up, right? So Tammy's gotten into making some sourdough bread. We used to do it all the time when we were younger. She had some. We had a long high school friend, I think, or my sister rather, as well, who got it from one of our high school friends. And so Tammy has this starter, and it sits in a little jar, and it's just liquidy looking and kind of mucky. But you take a little spoonful of that, and you mix it with some potato flakes and some sugar and some flour and some other things, and then you put it in a bowl and you cover it over. It underneath that towel that she uses, that's kind of sagging at that bowl at night as she puts it where she does. That next morning, that towel is somewhat raised from that bowl, and if you pull it off, you can see that something happened with that leaven, that it began to permeate and bubble up. It started very at the core, and it just bubbled up out over to it, so that small batch ends up making 2 to 3 loaves of bread. This is the gospel. This is what it does. You preach the truth to someone, the gospel of God, and you'll see that it'll take root and it'll make changes. Lord willing, that's what's happening in you. I could tell you story after story of people that I've seen come to Christ from just different backgrounds, and they have been transformed to look like Jesus. Some of these people that I know, that I think of often, is a friend of mine who was a basic drug dealer. And the conversations that I had with him, of telling him, listen, man, people like you who live like you, they don't go to heaven when they die, and preach the gospel to what looked like a cold stone face. And yet, if you look at that life today, it's transformative. I did a funeral last week for a lady who had 6 kids, and she was a single mom, and she wasn't a believer, but a pastor came to her house, sat down, and had what they call community coffee, right? That's the certain kind of coffee in Louisiana they drink. And she's, over those conversations, she came to Christ. At the funeral, the believers that were there as a result of her life was powerful. This is how the kingdom grows. It's a little bit of leaven. So she took a little bit of what she knew, Miss Betty did, and she gave it to her kids. And Aaron, my friend, took a little bit of what he had, and he gave it to others. And so you see the fruit of this. This is how the kingdom grows. And so you can see it. If you go to India, as I have many times, that's where doubting Thomas went. Landed at the tip, the southern tip of India, and then worked his way up. Got to about the road to Calcutta, Nagpur, in that area, and he was martyred for his faith. If you go there today, you can almost, like, there's this clear line. The influence of the gospel, as it reached the southern area, less hostile. Even the ground is more fertile than everything above it. You go up north, and the more north you go, the more hostile the territory, more wicked the people, and more barren is the land. Why? Because it's that gospel kingdom. And so I say this today to encourage us in that sense. The kingdom is coming. Right? And you should see pieces of it. Externally, you can see the kingdom. You can see the pockets of it. Internally, you can see life being changed. And so Jesus just wanted to remind us all that that's what the kingdom of God is like. It's not going to be some flash in the pan. All of a sudden, there's a palace and there's all of this great stuff. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be slow growing, but as it grows, it's going to become a shelter and a haven, not just for Israel, but for the world. And as it grows and permeates, you can't stop it. You put a little leaven anywhere, and it's going to permeate. It always influences, and the gospel is influencing the world even today in the midst of this darkness. And so, man, how powerful is that? Just good reminder that you and I are experiencing the kingdom today, but there's going to come a day we'll see it fully. Man, Lord bless you guys. Have a great weekend. I can't wait to jump back into more of this truth with you Monday morning. Have a good one.